Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the 817 podcast. Today we have a treat. We're going to have an interview with Councilwoman Ann Zadeh from District 9 and also a Fort Worth mayoral candidate. Really excited as this is going to be a deep dive with her. Jimmy, what are you looking forward to when we sit down with Ann?
I'm just excited to get to know her more. She doesn't represent us, and so maybe we don't know her super well. There are probably a lot of you who aren't represented by her, but she's been doing a lot of really great work, not just in District 9, but that has spanned across the city. So I'm excited to get to meet her and to hear more from her.
Yeah, she's the councilwoman for District 9 since 2014. She's been a Fort Worth resident for 25 years. 6 years she was appointed by Betsy Price to the Zoning Commission, and Mayor Moncrief. But so really exciting to have her here and get to learn about her. She services a big district, 100,000 people. So really excited to talk to her. So here's Ann Zadeh.
That I was familiar with y'all's podcast before you reached out to me.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I had heard it a couple of times.
Well, that's
Thanks
awesome.
for listening.
Yeah.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and dive in, and how we start all the interviews is basically, what is your Fort Worth story? How did you come to care about Fort Worth?
Well, I moved here in 1990 when I married my husband. I had lived in California, grew up in California, and had just finished undergrad. And he had a job here in Fort Worth, and I was planning to go to grad school. So we got married. I came here, started grad school at UTA, and we lived on the east side of Fort Worth because he'd gone to law school at SMU, and I was going to be going to UTA, and he had a job in Fort Worth. So we were kind of trying to stay where we could be really connected to all those things. And I would just say that in every community I've ever lived in, I've always been someone to get involved in the community. So as soon as we bought a house, I joined a neighborhood association and started, being a part of the community that I lived in, because it's kind of my background. I don't know how much you all know about where I came from, but my parents were on the faculty at a Quaker boarding school, and I grew up there from when I was 8 months old until I was 18 when I graduated from that school. And Quakers make decisions by coming to consensus. So the community would get together and talk through things and, come to a consensus on those things before moving forward. So that community building kind of thing has been part of my DNA, I guess. So just getting involved here locally. I went to school and got my master's in city and regional planning and started working as a consultant for a lot of small towns throughout the Metroplex that didn't have their own in-house staff, and got really busy with all that and loved it, and then started a family. I don't know how far you want me to get into this.
No, go for it. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, no, continue with what happened. Like, did you, I guess, even with the degree, did you see yourself going into kind of politics eventually when you were started, or at least maybe even into just city government role? Like, what was the future plan when being here?
All of my clients when I was working as a consultant were cities and municipalities, but I never saw myself on the elected side of things. That wasn't anything that I ever had thought about doing. It was after I served on the Zoning Commission for 6 years, and people started to say, oh, you know a lot about what goes on in the city. You should be on the city council. But we had two previous council members in the district that I live in that had been doing a fantastic job, Wendy Davis and then Joel Burns. And so I wasn't really interested in running against either one of them. And it took some convincing from my friends to do this in the first place. But when Joel stepped down in the middle of a term and it was an open seat, the people who had suggested that I do this were like, okay, well, now's the time. So that was my first running for office. I'd never done it before. I didn't realize how much of an undertaking it was. I'd done leadership in the neighborhood association, but representing a district of over 100,000 people is quite a bigger feat than just being a volunteer in the neighborhood association. So I jumped in by reaching out to all the neighborhood associations in the district and introducing myself and making a case for my education and background and community engagement being strong points for being a good representative of the citizens and residents of the district. And there were 6 of us in that original race, and we had to have a runoff, clearly, because it's hard to get more than 50% of the vote if you have 6 people vying for those votes. But I was in the top 2, and then I came out on top in the end. So I've been in office since 2014.
How do you see Fort Worth evolve since you and your husband being here? And like, how have you seen it change, and where do you see it kind of going as you now kind of evolve in your role in Fort Worth?
I mean, I look at things from a city planning perspective quite often. So I was involved in a lot of the, as a citizen, just as a resident, in some of the urban village planning that happened back in the early 2000s. And I think some of that put in place a foundation that led to some really excellent outcomes. So really walkable communities like Magnolia, the near South Side. Some of them, West 7th, I know a lot of people point out and don't have as, maybe have some negative connotations with that, but I think we're doing some work over there to make it more walkable and bikeable as well. And then downtown, and, we have a lot of really walkable areas in the city of Fort Worth. The Stockyards area is walkable. The cultural district is walkable. It's not just District 9, but I think that kind of a walkable community where people can live and work and play in close proximity to everything that they need in their daily lives. And if they need to commute further for a job, that makes sense. But for those things like grocery store or nail salon or, post office or whatever, I mean, I can walk and mail letters on Bluebonnet Circle. I can walk to Westcliff Shopping Center and do grocery shopping and get my nails done. That's the kind of communities I think we should try to have throughout the city, not just in the urban core, not just inside the loop, but pretty much everywhere where people would like to live.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's something that we are both really big on is public transportation, walkable, bikeable areas. And I feel like seeing what's happened with Bluebonnet Circle is a really great testament to that. I graduated from TCU in 2015, and I lived within a couple blocks of campus, but never went over to Bluebonnet Circle because it just felt like sort of eroded and jaded in a lot of ways. But now anytime I drive through it, it's just beautiful.
It was a Steer Fort Worth event that kind of sparked the redo of Bluebonnet Circle. And that happened right in 2013, right before I ran for office. And I live in that neighborhood. So, I was involved in the neighborhood side of that event. And we did a 2-day pop-up kind of what would it be like if we changed the right-of-ways on there so that people weren't just zooming onto the circle off of University, and took it down to 1 lane and added the additional parking. And so we did that just temporarily. And then the city took that up and restriped. And the same thing that happened on South Main. That's exactly some under cover of darkness. Some folks went out and restriped South Main, and now South Main is what it is today. So I think those are cool things that people who live in the city who aren't necessarily planners can get involved in and make their community better.
Yeah, I think my big excitement for this with just this upcoming election is just how unique everybody is. I actually think we have a really strong group of people, like in a sense of I think it's really exciting. So I'm really interested in what are some of your priorities going forward in the sense of if you do lead Fort Worth and be able to cast a vision for everyone. What are some of your priorities in that vision?
Yeah, I think that, many people know what I've been working on in the council seat. And a lot of that is the development and the planning and the services and public transportation, as you talked about, I'm very passionate about. But I think that there's some other things that, as much as I'm proud of the things that we've accomplished, there's some things that we still need to do to kind of steer a better path for our community. And some of that has come up in the last couple of years in regards to racial equity. And I think that a lot of that has a history in kind of the way cities have been planned in the past. And, I think that you guys are kind of familiar with some of the redlining that occurred and things that have made, and the way that the city has responded to constituents and residents in bringing the services that the city has in kind of a squeaky wheel gets the grease way of doing things has led to some inequities across the city in the neighborhoods. And I think we've made some strides to improve that with the neighborhood improvement funding that we've done over the last 4 or 5 years, where we started in Stop 6 and then Ash Crescent, Northside. And then last year it was Rosemont, which is a neighborhood in District 9. And then coming up, it's going to be the Como neighborhood. And so I think we need to accelerate that kind of effort, because we're not going to get caught up doing it as in that kind of, it's a little bit too slow, I think, to get caught up. But that's something I think we need to work on. And then engaging people across the entire city to be a part of the community. Many people don't know how to access their government, or have fear of accessing their government. And, I don't want people to feel like they have to come to City Hall to be a part of the decision making. I think all those kind of things should happen out in the community. So the way I've led in District 9 has been not necessarily to have people come to me, but to go out into the community and meet people where they are. Everybody's busy and they've got a lot on their plates, just taking care of their families and doing their jobs and that kind of stuff. And to add extra meetings on top of that in order to have their input in basically how their community is going to respond to them, I think is just an extra burden and a barrier to that engagement. So I want to figure out ways to take down those barriers and have more engagement.
Well, and I feel like one of the examples that's happening right now is with the Hemphill area. And I know that you've been at the forefront, whether it's talking to the Star Telegram or communicating with the community groups that are wanting to voice their opinions. What are some ways that you feel like you would want to see that communication change? Or I guess how does that change?
Yeah, I think that the city does things as legally prescriptive, and that doesn't necessarily always reach out to everyone. And, we offer translation instead of just putting things out in a language that a great deal of people in the city speak, and that is Spanish. And so I think we've kind of, in the last 6 years, started to do a better job with that. Our neighborhood engagement office has quite a few bilingual staff. They're helping neighborhood associations. They're making sure that communications get put out in the beginning in English and Spanish, not requiring people to request a translator or requiring people to request translation. That's just a barrier right in and of itself. So in regards to the proposals for improvements along Hemphill, that was really a community-driven initiative. People who own businesses and live in the neighborhoods along that corridor and have been involved in the leadership in their own neighborhood associations and task forces in that area saw that pedestrians had been killed along that corridor, and that there were children that went to school on one side of the corridor and lived on the other, and decided that they wanted to figure out a way to make some improvements there. So they initiated that whole process, did a lot of engagement, but clearly we've seen in the last several months that some folks weren't engaged, which is exactly what I was talking to before, trying to figure out all the ways that we can. So while taking into consideration all the effort that's gone into the work thus far, they've pulled back and withdrawn that application for the zoning that they were looking at, and are going forward with a multitude of additional public meetings to get that input and get that information out so that everybody knows exactly what it is that we're talking about. Because I think there was some information that wasn't quite accurate. And, I would be fearful too if I heard some of the things that people were saying this was going to do and the results were going to be. So I think that we can learn a lesson from that, and we can try to build a model that could be used going forward so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So this could be a way to better engage in the future and respond to the concerns and criticisms that folks have that are warranted. So absolutely want to get that engagement going and do better in the future.
Can you dive into the independent redistricting committee and like that vision? I think that's a really cool thing that I think separates and gets people excited, which it also sounds very difficult to maybe pull off as well, but at least from just a citizen. Can you kind of talk more into it?
Yeah. So back in 2016, when we had the charter election to add 2 council districts, and that was successful. So we knew that after the 2020 census, we were going to be adding 2 council districts and redistricting. I was approached by some folks who had been familiar with an independent redistricting commission, and I was impressed by that process and thought that was a process we should pursue. I had been on the zoning commission when we redistricted in 2010, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention at that time. I knew that individuals and groups could submit maps during that process, and that was kind of a cool mapping exercise that nerdy planners think is interesting and fun. But this independent commission idea I thought sounded really good. So I had brought the people who were recommending it to staff, and staff was looking through some other communities that had done that, and brought to the rest of the council that as a possibility. And the majority of the council felt like sticking with the way the charter is written now, having the council draw those maps was the way to go. You don't have to change the charter to do it a different way. The council just has to decide to, let somebody else do it besides the council members. The majority of the council was thinking that this was the responsibility of council members duly elected by the residents of their district. And so I was the only one that kind of was championing the idea of independent redistricting commission. But in the meantime, the redistricting task force has been doing their work to come up with the criteria by which the maps will be drawn. And so anybody who comes to me and asks about whether or not the independent redistricting is still a possibility, I share with them, I think it is still a possibility. And pretty much every public meeting I've seen that the task force has had, that's been the main call to action from people who are interested in all of this. So I think time-wise, I don't have the timeline in front of me, but time-wise, I think there's still time to do that. And it will be the decision of the council after the May 1st election, because all that will happen then. So if there's some changes in that, then maybe it will be revisited. The task force in the meantime is coming up with criteria, and I think their criteria is good and solid, and they're doing good work. If we do end up doing it as the council drawing the maps, I think the important thing and what I've shared with folks is to make sure that that's all a very public process. So if somebody comes in and submits maps that they think we should do, and staff goes over it and submits maps to the council of what they think should happen, all the discussion about which maps are going to be adopted and what changes are going to be made and where things might be moved around should be done in a public process with reasoning given, so that everyone understands why the maps that finally get adopted are the ones that were prevailed in the end.
So for my clarity's sake, so May 1st, we are still voting for 9 districts, correct?
Yes.
And then after that, do we know the timeline on when there would be an election for the last 2 districts? Or is it just sort of like once the new council is formed, like it'll get put on the agenda and within a certain time frame it happens?
No, there'll be 2 new districts added before the 2023 election.
Okay.
So the 2021 election is the one coming up May 1st. And then we have elections every 2 years. And so the next election will have the new districts and the new maps.
Gotcha. Perfect. I was sort of confused. I was like, I don't know if we'd have 2 new ones starting this year or if it's going forward.
Yeah, it's 2023.
Perfect. So local elections, obviously, especially in Fort Worth, turnout is not great. What does it look like to you to try and mobilize people to be passionate about local politics and to get out and vote in May? Because I think last election it was like 7% voter turnout, and a lot of the young people that play a big role in shaping Fort Worth don't have their voices heard because they didn't go vote. So what does that look like over the next few months to try and mobilize a crowd of people that typically just sits at home for a local election?
It's so frustrating to me because I have never not voted. I mean, the idea of not voting to me is just, I don't understand it at all. It's not a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes a little research so that you're kind of educated when you go do it. But I just can't imagine not voting. And my first election, when people talked about going and knocking on doors and asking people to support them, and you can get access to lists of people vote, and there's door after door after door of households that don't vote. And I want to encourage everyone to vote. So the idea of just going and talking to the people who traditionally vote, I think that's abhorrent to me. I want to encourage everyone to vote. And, we say it over and over and over again that local elections most impact your daily life.
Yeah.
I mean, getting involved in your own neighborhood association, you get to make some pretty big decisions about advocating for things that are going to happen in your neighborhood. Voting in local elections, you're getting to choose the people who are going to make some pretty significant decisions about how your life is going to function on a daily basis. So other than just keep banging that drum and telling people how important it is, I'm not sure how to get people to understand and believe. I guess remind them when something goes differently than the way they want it to. Say, well, if you'd gone out and voted, maybe someone who more aligned with your way of thinking would be in office making these decisions. But I think it is very important, and I hope that we can continue to improve on the turnout, because I know we get excited when it's a little bit more than years past, but when you look at the numbers in comparison to the eligible voters in the entire city, it's frustrating. And we work really hard to get out there and introduce ourselves and encourage folks to look at us as the people that we want to represent you. Yeah. And then to have people just not bother to go vote. And you've got early voting. There's there's all this time when you can do it. It's not even one day.
Yeah. I think what's exciting is what you're seeing right now in the news around, like, a lot of mayors that are exciting are creating a future for their city, in the sense of, like, I think what Suarez is doing in Miami with a lot of these, tech people coming in to be excited and move to Miami. Miami wasn't on the map in the sense of Austin, Texas was like on the map in the sense of this is where you want to go start your career. And, but I feel, and I even think the mayor of Birmingham, he's a young African-American man as well, who's also kind of excited a lot of young talent. I think that's a huge kind of next step in Fort Worth. One of our guests that we had was Cameron Cushman at UT Health Science Center, and he mentioned how we're the 13th largest city, but we're the 40th in investments into startups and technology. And so that means Albuquerque, Omaha actually invest in more startups than Fort Worth. And as an entrepreneur in the city, what I think could excite a lot of young people to go vote is a cast of vision that is modern to the 21st century, that Fort Worth is going to evolve into something like that. What is your thoughts of, like, that kind of vision of Fort Worth needing to take kind of a leap into its own, especially at a time where I think people are looking to level up their housing and work from home, and it's going to need an office. And now my work is going to allow me to live wherever I want. Like, how do we make Fort Worth a destination or a place that people want to raise families, live their careers when they can really be wherever they want?
Yeah, I think that going back to kind of the work that was done early in the urban villages, I think we have some examples of that in Fort Worth. But like you said, that Cameron talked about, people don't, because the other thing is we're that 13th largest city, but when people are asked where we are in the level of sizes of cities, we're in that 40 number too. People just don't know. And, I'm not as young as some of the people who are doing all this young entrepreneurial stuff, but I have two sons who are 23 and 19, and they're both away at college right now. And I would very much like them to have Fort Worth be a consideration for where they want to come back and raise their families. So it's just as important to me as kind of the young people who are out there looking for the right place to live. And I think that we have started to invest in the right conditions to, like, create the right conditions where that entrepreneurial growth can happen, where, big businesses provide opportunities for jobs and all of that. But we also need to focus a little bit more on our small and medium-sized businesses and support them in what they're doing. So I think you guys had Robert Stearns on and, Tech Fort Worth, and we're doing a lot of that innovation and creation of that environment in some pockets around the city, but not everybody knows that that's available. And I think we need to do a better job of that availability. I mean, I've got examples of business owners that have done incredible creative things. I just came from an opening of the new business next to Paco's on Magnolia this morning They've expanded their dining room for the restaurant and now opened this fruit business where they're selling delicious. I had some this morning. It was wonderful. And so I think that supporting that kind of entrepreneurship in Fort Worth we're right on the cusp of that. And some of the entrepreneurs that are here, and just encouraging them to do that here. The city can make those conditions exist, invest in the infrastructure that's necessary, and then the return on investment when those businesses come in and grow in the areas where we've made those investments are, a win-win for everybody, for those individual business owners and for the city itself and for the residents that get to live next door to that and avail themselves of that. So I think we're really on the cutting edge of that. And instead of, old stodgy people making decisions downtown and that being completely separate from this energy and excitement that young people are bringing to the employment future, kind of marrying those two things together so that those people are not only growing their businesses, but being supported by the city and working together.
Yeah, I think because what's cool, Fort Worth is such I feel like I'll talk to someone and it's like, I think like half the people I talk to about Fort Worth, they're like, yeah, I think like some people are just okay with Fort Worth being how Fort Worth is, like a quaint big city that feels like a small town. And then I think you then have these like other sets of people who are like, oh, Fort Worth we're just beginning who we actually are. But it's like you have roots, but then you have like this growth. And I think it's a yin and yang that often happens from like, are we Cowtown Stockyards or are we this, the funk, Panther City? And it's like, and that's what, as a citizen who cares about it and wants to be a part of it, I'm really excited to see kind of how do you see collaboration work in our city?
Yeah, I don't see those things as being at odds with each other. Somebody mentioned to me that, if you're coming from any other place in Texas, that you can find, like any other city, you can find an area of Fort Worth that may remind you a little bit of Austin. You can find an area of Fort Worth that reminds you of like a more metropolitan Houston kind of thing. You can find an area of Fort Worth that reminds you of a San Antonio. So you can find a place that you're comfortable. What I think we need to work on is bringing those places together and not having those silos. I mean, government has those silos, and I think our city kind of has those silos where people don't get out and they don't even really know what else is available in the city. So I think that being a leader going forward, doing a better job of making sure that all of those parts of the city have a seat at the table, and not just to be heard during, a little meeting and then going about our business, but actually coming in and collaborating and working on those things together. And sustainably, not just one time when something flares up, but kind of processes that keep that collaboration going forward. I don't think that it's a conflict to try to be a more metropolitan city that attracts business, that then attracts employment for the kids that are coming out of our schools, and keeping it funky and having, neighborhoods that provide a variety of different housing types. I think all of those things make it so that it's a more attractive city for a broad section and a more diverse community. And I think diversity makes a stronger community for everyone.
I know we talked a lot about redistricting and stuff. I know there's been stuff going on about apartments being, are we making too many apartments in Fort Worth? I don't know what your take. I think there's a report or survey coming out in the next upcoming meeting here in February.
Colleagues asked at the last meeting, he was concerned about the number of rezoning cases especially where properties that were zoned commercial or industrial were being asked to be rezoned to multifamily. And the concern being that we have an upside down tax base where we have more pressure on residential property owners than commercial and industrial property owners. And so there's a real need to have more of that burden on the commercial and industrial so that it's not such a burden on residential. So his point was that there is, that concern of rezoning commercial property and then losing that ability to have that commercial development. So I think that it's important to have a broad cross section of housing in the appropriate locations. So if you build multifamily out in the middle of nowhere on a 2-lane road that doesn't have any public transit nearby, doesn't have any shopping or jobs nearby, that is not a really smart, sustainable way to develop. So we definitely should kind of hold back on that. But I think appropriately located, broad variety of housing is a good sustainable way to develop. But it definitely takes input from everyone and being protective of neighborhoods that exist, and allowing that infill development to happen in an appropriate way that's not negatively impactful on the stuff that's already there.
So obviously, Fort Worth mayoral election and most Fort Worth city positions are nonpartisan. Without that like structure there, what is the best way for people to get to know you and get to know about you? Because I feel like while there's obviously flaws with our two-party system, but it does provide like that initial, like, okay, I can at least get, the top like 10 or 15 things that they might care about or how they feel on those issues. How do you want people to get to know you, and how can they do that?
Well, I mean, I hope that I'm known by quite a few more people than the first time I ever ran for office, having been out in the community and doing work that I've been doing. And I hope it's beyond District 9, because I really feel like I have done, work beyond just the confines of the district. But I think it's important to ask people the questions that are important to you. I think that just putting a party label on someone and assuming that they feel a certain way about something is not a great way to make a decision about whether you think that person is going to represent you well. I think flat out asking the questions about the things that are important to you. Many of the things that we do at the city level, I don't think should be partisan. I think there's some things that have been made partisan that are pretty ridiculous. I think that just making, safe, walkable communities and providing providing transportation and jobs and, all of these things are going to be beneficial to the entire community. So I just would ask that people ask me the questions. I've had people say, oh, I don't know her, or I don't know how she feels about this or that. I'm happy to tell anybody my opinions and thoughts. And the way I've made decisions all the way up until now and would continue to make decisions is to always listen to what everybody has to say before making a decision, and then making the right decision, whether it's the politically expedient decision or not, and explaining myself. So I feel like I'm an open book and happy to talk to anybody about any concerns that they have or what it is that they see for their vision, and see if that vision aligns with their own before making a decision. And hopefully I can convince enough people that that's the case.
And then if somebody wanted to get involved on your team and help you campaign and help you go knock on doors, how do they do that? How do they reach out and become part of the Zadeh for Mayor team?
So I have a website that's just www.zadeh.com. And on there is ways to get involved, ways to donate. All of that is on that website. And then my Gmail address is just anzadeh@gmail.com. So if anybody wants to send me an email, they can do that as well. I'm on like the social media platforms and stuff. But going through the website is probably the best way if you're specifically looking to get involved with the Zadeh for Mayor campaign. And I appreciate anybody's support and questions before supporting. Absolutely. That people want to do.
Jimmy, you said the comment of 7% of Fort Worth votes. I wonder, when you look at districts, what percentage of districts vote? And I would assume your district's a high voting district if we ranked all the districts. So it seems like the mobilization of your own district could really lead there. Does it seem like that's the case in the sense of the people on your team and y'all's strategy to, I guess, win the election? Does that sound accurate, or do you know any data on what percentage of your district votes compared to other districts in Fort Worth?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think every time there's an election, we look at those kind of things. I would hope that it would turn out that way. But I want everybody to be involved. I want to be getting to know people who don't know me up to this point, and represent people across the entire city, not just in the district that I've represented up to this point. I want to encourage engagement and involvement from everyone, but I would hope so. In making this decision, I had to decide whether or not, I can't run for the council seat and the mayor's seat at the same time. So I saw that my background and my training and the service that I've provided up to this point, I think make me the most qualified candidate. And I believe that there is a path to success. So I'm willing to put in the work and talk to anybody and everybody and hopefully end up as the mayor of Fort Worth.
What is so if you win, what is like first 90 days? What does hitting the ground running look like for you? What are those like first 2 or 3 things that you want to knock out right away?
Yeah, I think that some people have referred back to the recommendations of the Race and Culture Task Force and how some of those things have been underway, but maybe in a slower way than people would like. So I definitely think that we need to get back to that and getting more of those things adopted. The redistricting. So I think it's going to be the first 90 days is clearly going to be dedicated to the redistricting and looking back at some of the improvements and bringing about the recommendations of the Race and Culture Task Force. So I think that those are definitely going to be at the top of the list.
Do you have a gauge of, because we had such a iconic national election, what is your expectation of lift in election turnout for May 1st? Do you have a kind of an idea, or even maybe there's some data that is out there around what does a mayoral election looks like after a national election?
Yeah, I've been running into a lot of people who have election fatigue. So that concerns me a little bit. That everybody was so focused on November. It kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the room as far as anybody even thinking about May elections. And so I fear that there's probably some people who don't even know that there's an election coming up on May 1st. So I think it's going to take a lot of outreach and talking and informing and getting the word out to get people focused on this, because of the fact that they've been so focused on what's been going on nationally, and they're still focused on that. And, we're also in the middle of a pandemic. So that is a challenge as well. I have tried to be very careful with COVID recommendations from medical professionals. I've encouraged everyone to follow all the recommendations of our local health professionals and the CDC. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to meet people in person, because I think it's really important to see people eyeball to eyeball and not just through a screen, but definitely in outdoor locations and physically distanced to be able to have that contact, but in a safe manner, because I want us all to continue to stay as safe as possible.
Yeah, I think I am really, like, I am actually excited for, based off of how the national election turned out. I'm actually really excited for our local election, just because for me, I think there's a lot to learn out of the 4 candidates, and I think there's a lot of talent with different strengths. And so I'm really excited to just see how it all pans out. It seems like a lot of people have been quiet, and maybe it's because people are aware that people are fatigued and haven't really started their mobilizing people. What is your take on, I guess, I look at, other candidates maybe have the Democratic Party, large endorsements, different communities. I guess, how do you see a path forward to kind of be aware, have shine light on who you are when there's, I guess, 4 pretty strong candidates?
Yeah. I mean, I think that we have a strong team to get out the word and answer anybody's questions and communicate with people broadly, whether that be, like I said, one-on-one, through mailing, through social media. I think all of that stuff is going to be up and running and cranking along. I think I had sent out, people had asked me whether I was going to do this prior to Mayor Price making any kind of decision, or at least publicly making a decision about what she was going to do. And so I had said, I've always considered it. People have suggested it to me probably for the last 6 years. So, I'd never said I would never do it. It was more like, if that opportunity presented itself in a way that I thought I could further serve the entire community and make Fort Worth a better place, that I would definitely consider it. And so it wasn't until after Mayor Price announced that she was definitely not going to run that I was really seriously considering it. And then I wanted to let other folks, share with me whether they thought that was a good idea. So my first public statement was very much, I'm prepared to do this. Mm-hmm. I believe that I'm the most qualified candidate. I believe that I would do the best job, but I wanted to hear from folks. And the overwhelming response that I got back was very positive. So that was heartwarming and gave me kind of the courage to take that next step and actually make it official and run. So I hope to continue to have those kind of communications with people and get the word out more broadly and answer any questions that people have and lead to a road of success.
Yeah, I feel like with almost every election you hear like this is the most important election in our lifetime, and we've heard that a lot over the last year. But between two members of city council running for mayor, a couple others retiring, 2 more seats being added, like this, and a new police chief coming in, like this really is a major turning point in the future of Fort Worth, and the people shaping the city now will have a lot of say for where it goes. Yeah. So it really does actually feel like, oh, this is a very important election for at least like the next decade of Fort Worth.
I think you're right. And I hope that that kind of energy continues, even when it isn't some, like pent up desire to be involved because of not having been involved up to that point. I would like us to continue to have this kind of energy and level of desire to be part of building the community that we all live in going forward. I don't want it to be a thing where the people get in and then they're the ones making the decisions and we're not continually reaching out and engaging with the energy and desires of the community as we go along. I don't think that elected office should be something that people get in and do for, decades at a time. Cities should be led by the people who are having the energy and the excitement at that time. And we should be continually looking for more folks that want to be in those leadership positions and have them, serve on boards and commissions and be part of all those decision-making processes and rise up to that level of leadership. So I see that as being a sustainable way to keep a city kind of exciting and the best place for people to want to live.
Yeah, we live on East Side. So that was when we talk to a lot of, I think we're excited and why we're passionate about what we do and just, we really love it, like caring about Fort Worth and hopefully getting other young people, excited about just journalism and politics. And I just think about all the young, specifically my people of color friends who didn't even know Prop A was going on, yet they're down in city council fighting for like Black Lives Matter and yet they didn't even know Prop A was happening and didn't vote for it. I think that's probably my biggest fear is who gets left out, especially as diverse Fort Worth is. And so I think, how do you see getting, I guess, people of color more aware of the power that they have if they actually stood up, specifically in South Side and East Side? I
think that, groups like the guys at Community Frontline are doing incredible work in that area. When I first started talking to them, I was like, wait, what can the city do for you? And they were like, no. We're building community. We're not asking anything of you. And I was like, but there are resources I would love to bring. So I think that kind of grassroots thing and then being sustainable, they've got, they're reaching out to the community. They're helping older people in their community. They've got young people coming up through. They're informing them about how to be involved. They're involved in school board stuff and, their community with the schools that they're in their community with the city, all that kind of stuff. So I see those kind of groups engaging and energizing young Black and brown people that live in this community so that they are a part of the process. And not making them come down to City Hall, but doing that work in their communities and then having that work be supported by just the infrastructure that the city has available. So making sure that those neighborhoods have safe streets and sidewalks and lighting and, all of the infrastructure that the city brings on our side to those communities and continuing to grow that engagement and that involvement.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know we hit the 45 team, so I know that if there's anything you want to say or something we didn't hit on that you thought that would be important for listeners to hear, if you have anything, we could go there.
I just appreciate the opportunity to meet with you guys. I listen to podcasts when I can't sleep at night, so I've listened to y'all a couple of times. And if there's ever anything that you have questions about, I'm happy to answer as well. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I think you're part of the future of Fort Worth too, and that energy and engagement and entrepreneurship that we've been talking about. And I'm just excited to be in the role that I'm in now, and hopefully can lead the whole city as the mayor in the future to kind of grow and expand all of that and keep it going.
Love it. We're excited for you and really looking forward to it.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Thank you. That was awesome. We're super appreciative of Anne for giving us her time and her energy to come talk with us. It's really exciting to get to meet the mayoral candidates and actually dive into what they're about.
Yeah, I like how she, at the end, she kind of low-key said, yeah, I listen to podcasts to go to sleep, and I listen to you guys sometimes. So I was like, so we help you sleep. I see. So I was like...
And she still agreed to come on after having listened to us before.
Yeah, that's a good sign. So anyways, I thought it was great and really an exciting conversation. So hope you guys learned something. Again, go to anzadeh.com to learn more about her. And if you want to be a part of her team or donate, that's the place to do it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.